right, welcome back once again, everybody. It's the Dr. Tree Fruit and Dawn podcast. It is Wednesday, September 18th. Long time no see. I'm here with Dr. Carrie Peter. Say hi, Carrie.
Oh, hello.
And Dr. Sean Kumar. Say hi, Sean.
Hello, everyone.
All right, so it's been a while since we've done one of these. Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back for all of us. We'll get started with Carrie. We'll just kind of get into the swing of it.
Okay.
Like I said, it's September 18th. Everyone's in the middle of harvest, and Carrie, take it away.
Yeah. We had a dry summer, like for a lot of places, but it's important to remember that it didn't start dry. It didn't start off dry. It was really wet until about like the first week in June. And then basically the water faucet shut off and then everything just dried up. So a couple of things to remember, a couple points that I just want to make. One, I know people are seeing bitter rot, and because I've been getting emails and I've been getting comments about bitter rot. And one thing, and people are asking, like, it didn't rain. I was applying regularly. I was doing this. I was doing that. Well, okay. So as I've always am reminded by the veterans in the industry, every season's different. And so typically with bitter rot, we always in Pennsylvania, we've aimed our really aggressive control time for about like mid to late June because that coincides with that hot weather. And hot, I mean, we're talking averaging 80 degrees or, around, it's very, very warm weather. Well, this year, those hot temps started at the end of May. I mean, they started a little bit earlier, and I think that caught us a little off guard. And I know people were still aggressively treating and doing the best they can with treatments. But we also had rain showers. We had some pretty significant rain events in that late May to early June time period. And with the bitter rot fungus, you have to remember, this is a very tricky fungus to manage because it has that latent period after infection, meaning when that spore lands on the fruit skin, it germinates and then directly punctures the skin tissue to anchor in, and then it goes to sleep. So it's not actively growing anymore. So you really need to have that fungicide there on the fruit during that wetting event as that spore is germinating. And you need to make sure that it doesn't puncture the fruit. So it doesn't have that opportunity of going latent and going to sleep and then manifesting weeks or maybe even months later. It has that latent period. And when that infection is dormant or when that infection's latent, it's not actively growing. So fungicides aren't going to touch it. They aren't going to hold that infection back because fungicides only work on stuff that's actively growing. Um, and so this is where, sometimes I think when I talk to growers, that's when I see there may be sort of a hiccup in their spray schedules that they may have not timed it just right. So with that said, the reason why you're seeing bitter rot a little more this year, I suspect, is because we got the hot weather much earlier than we're used to seeing. I usually enjoy working outside in early June and mid June. It's usually really comfortable, very cool. Not this year. It got hot and it stayed hot. It stayed hot all summer. And so that was just perfect. That was a breeding ground for the bitter rot fungus. It likes very warm and it only needs about 12 hours of wetness in order for that infection to occur. So with that said, that's not our only rot that we worry about right now, but just kind of an explanation as far as why we're seeing the rots that we're seeing right now, like bitter rot. Now, a shout out to the growers who still have fruit on the trees that may not be harvested until, say, sometime in October, late October, maybe early November. Please make sure you get another fungicide spray on those fruit. I know that there are growers that say, well, my last spray usually goes on the beginning of September and that's it. Ugh, that's a little long, especially since We got some significant rainfall at the end of September, or the beginning of September. It's raining today. I mean, it's sort of all over the place in Pennsylvania today with the rain. The season is not over yet, and oftentimes we do see the rainfall pick up this time of year. So please make sure you get another spray on your, a protective fungicide spray on your fruit to protect your fruit. It will pay off. I know it's a hassle because you're juggling a lot right now, and I know harvest is dominating everyone's schedule, especially with some varieties being ready to pick sooner rather than later. It seems I know Sean will talk about this as far as varieties being ripening much sooner this year. Um, but what we've seen with my student Johanny Castro's post-harvest disease work is that we see issues in pack houses where there was 40 days from in between harvest and the last fungicide spray. That's a long time to be without a fungicide. So we've seen post-harvest rots like alternaria rot or bullseye rot show up on fruit, especially if fruit's being kept for more than a month or 3 months. If you're holding fruit for at least 6 months, it's really important that those late varieties get protected. Also, as a reminder that sooty blotch and fly speck, you can still get infections in the month of September. This isn't just a traditionally summer disease. New infections can pop up as late as September. Um, so as far as what to use right now, for later varieties, you can probably still get away with Captan, but I know some people are worried about residue. And the stronger chemicals that will hopefully kind of keep things at bay are your strobilurins or your frac 11s. So that's your Maravon, which has a pre-harvest interval of 0 days, Luna Sensation and Flynn Extra, which is a pre-harvest interval of 14 days. And just a reminder, so Maravon has a pre-harvest interval of 0 days, but it has a reentry of 12 hours. So I know everyone knows this, but I just want to gently remind folks is that if you spray Maravon in the morning, you got to wait 12 hours before you pick because the reentry is 12 hours. The reentry will always be the most important time period in that the reentry interval and the pre-harvest interval. So just as a reminder about that. Um, the other disease I just want to give a mention because we've had really good conditions over the last 6 weeks is southern blight, especially in the southern half of the state, which is where we've seen it the most. So southern blight is a soil-borne fungus. It lives, its fruiting body is called a sclerotia. It looks like a hard kernel, like a hard, tiny little kernel that lives in the soil. And it likes really wet weather and really hot weather. It likes warm soils. And we've had that over the last 6 weeks. So I've seen an uptick in incidence, especially in Adams County and Upper Adams County. And Freck is not immune. Over the last 2 weeks, we have a brand new site at Freck that has southern blight, and it is a brand new block. It was planted in 2023. And what we've known with the research of my graduate student Cameron Mihalik is that Bud 9 is 100% susceptible, so is Bud 10. And so those trees are on Bud 10. So rootstock is definitely going to play a role in the susceptibility of the tree to southern blight. So we're still learning as far as the degree of susceptibility of rootstocks, and there are degrees of susceptibility. Bud 9 and Bud 10, we know for sure, definitely are very susceptible. The Genevas, they vary. I can't say a blanket statement that all Genevas are tolerant or all the Genevas are susceptible. They definitely vary in their susceptibility, but I will address that later. Maybe in the winter we'll have a podcast. We'll bring Cameron on and he can give us the lowdown about southern blight. But just wanting to give a shout out to growers just to keep an eye on young blocks, especially blocks that have been planted in the last couple years, especially with Bud 9 or Bud 10 at this moment. If you see trees suddenly dying, I would recommend looking at the base of the tree, right at the soil line. You may or may not see sort of white webbing right at the crown. That usually only appears when there's really high humidity. Um, You will most likely see tiny little black seeds, or look, I always say them like not black, but brown, tannish brown seeds that are the sclerotia, and they're very obvious. And there may be white webbing connected to that. Areas that have lots of weeds or lots of detritus will definitely have this, but you don't need lots of weeds. I've seen them in completely bare soil around the tree as far as this sclerotia pop up. It'll be right at the base of the tree, but it looks like tiny little sesame seeds. They can be light tan, they can be dark brown. But they look like tiny little round balls is what you'll see. So just as a heads up to folks, especially in the southern part of the state. So definitely the south central area and probably the southeast area. To date, I'm only aware of Adams County having the problem, but that doesn't mean it's not in other parts of the state. I do know the Hudson Valley has had a report recently this summer, so I know it's not exclusive to us. So just as a quick reminder, just to keep an eye on things. And that's
Awesome.
it as far as my update for the season.
Awesome. Thanks, Gary.
Yep.
Sean.
Uh, Hello, everyone. Thanks, Don. I just want to talk a little bit about how the season's been for us so far in Pennsylvania. And so we started off, like Carrie mentioned, very, very unseasonably warm weather combined with no rainfall in June and July. And we had record early season for peaches. On the plus side, I think peaches really came out with good flavor. And based on what I've talked with growers around the state in different parts, it seems like we've had good prices for peaches, really good flavor in our peaches, especially because of the lack of rainfall in those 2 months. Excuse me. That's been a good bright spot for our industry this year in Pennsylvania. Following that, there was no break because our early apples. I hope you've been following our ripening updates that Daniel, Don, and I, along with my student Michael and Melanie Shoup, have been putting out. So, as you saw, the early apples were almost 2 weeks early, especially the premiers, and they were sometimes ready to harvest in the first week. Red Ridge Gala premiers, we started harvesting them so very, very early, 2 weeks earlier than normal. And then slowly towards the end of August, you saw the season sort of cooling and getting back to regular cool season fall weather. And so for the mid to late season varieties, we're seeing it go back to normal. So in fact, there seems to have been like a gap between the early season cultivars and the mid season cultivars, where sometimes in orchards, there was nothing to harvest for a week because there seems to be this gap. So that's something to note for growers, especially who are growing multiple different varieties and direct to consumer sales. Like you might want to fill that gap with some, excuse me, some varieties that are kind of between these early varieties and these mid-season varieties. And the other thing is the ripening updates as well. As you can see, we are seeing Daniel is doing that in Adams County, Don is doing that in Berks, and Michael and I are doing that in Center County. And we are mostly following the popular varieties that we have. Currently, we are, I know Adams County is in the middle of Golden Delicious Harvest, and we will soon harvest Golden Delicious as well in Berks and Center counties. Following that, Red Delicious, and then we'll also have updates for Evercrisp, Pink Lady, and Fuji as well towards the coming weeks. And that's pretty much it for me. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Sean. I was going to say it's still a little early for folks to be thinking about their fall weed control, but we'll talk about that. We can talk about that post harvest.
Yeah,
Uh,
thanks.
yeah, sure. And then Carrie, you had one final
Yeah.
update.
One final thing, and this is really important, and I will say to the PA growers and to anyone who subscribes to Fruit Times, you will be getting an update, a Fruit Times update very soon about this. But I would say probably the majority of the growers and the listeners are probably aware of the proposed interim decision from Mancozeb by the EPA. And so, fungicides or all chemicals go through a registration review. And in July 2024, the EPA sort of snuck it in with a bunch of other chemicals as far as what their proposed decision for usage and handling for Mancozeb. And they're major. And so listen carefully and also read carefully when the update goes out. But surrounding states have already put out alerts about this. The comments are due by October 16th, 2024, by like 11:59 p.m. We were able to get a month extra in order for like a 30-day extension because they initially were due yesterday or 2 days ago, which was a little crazy considering it's right in the middle of harvest. So listen up, folks. These are pretty major, especially for some crops. So Mancozeb, the registration it's proposed to be terminated for grapes, for all grapes. We're talking table grapes, wine grapes, juice grapes, raisin grapes. So I know Mancozeb is very important for grapes. I know we're predominantly tree fruit on the podcast, but I know a lot of folks have diversified farming and a lot of people do grow grapes. So if you aren't aware of this, you should be aware of this. Uh, this is major for you because I know what an important tool Mancozeb is for grapes. So that's the big one for folks in the fruit world. The other is spray drift reduction measures. It says that for non-occupational bystanders, when using aerial equipment to apply Mancozeb products to orchard and typical acreage field crops adjacent to residential areas, a 25-foot buffer from the edge of the treated area is required. So that's another decision they have made. Uh, the next one is the use of personal protective equipment requirements and engineering controls. This includes double layering clothing and gloves for all mixing, loading, and application scenarios, APF 10 respirators for several scenarios, closed loading systems for several formulations, applications, and crops, and enclosed cab requirements for certain handlers, including air blast applications for orchard vineyards and nurseries. So the details, this is all generalized, but the details are in the basically the review that I will include when I write my article. But it's also in other updates that around the Mid-Atlantic that have put out. So you're probably wondering like, okay, well, what scenarios are there? They're listed. I'm just not going through them right now. All right, changes to the restricted entry intervals, the REIs. This is a big one for pome fruits. Pome fruits, it's being changed to 4 days for all activities and the prohibition of hand thinning fruit. So that's a big one because I know folks are using Mancozeb well into the hand thinning period, which is often in early June, and that's when basically the pre-harvest interval, the 77-day pre-harvest interval, is your cutoff. For those that are growing vegetables, again, a shout out to the diversified farmers that are listening. Broccoli, cabbage is going to be increased to 6 days reentry. For pepper, tomato, cucurbitic vegetables to 3 days. And just as a note that the current Mancozeb labels require a 12 to 48 hour reentry depending on the crop or use site. So these are big changes. It's going from 12 to 48 hours to anywhere from 4 to 6 days. So that's a pretty significant change. And then finally, the last is about spray drift management measures. So the proposed changes are no applications during temperature inversions and when the wind speeds are greater than 10 miles per hour. Honestly, I don't know who wants to be spraying when it's more than 10 miles per hour outside. Nothing's going to be getting to your trees if it's that windy. Swath displacement or reduced boom length if wind speed is 10 miles per hour, more directed air blast applications to treated row and canopy foliage, and restrictions on droplet size. So those are the major highlights. And all of this is described in their proposed interim decision, which when I get this out, hopefully in this week, I will include that. And okay, so folks, the EPA needs to hear from you. And I can definitely help give you talking points, but they need your personal experience for this. Okay, so that's just a gentle reminder. For tree fruit, how is mancozeb helpful to us? Rust. And wouldn't you know that this was, especially in Adams County, one of the worst rust years we have had in a really, really long time. When I was going over my fruit, when I was going over my data for my leaf data, I had 50% rust infection on leaves on my untreated. I've never had it that high. Usually it's like maybe 5%, 50% this year. And I've got trees that, well, I left untreated on purpose, but they took a hit. Um, yes, there are single mode of action fungicides that work like your frac 3s, but mancozeb is your ace in the hole, as far as controlling this disease. And really, when you're tank mixing with mancozeb, you aren't going to have a rust problem. Rust can be really, really damaging, and rust spores fly far. And this is something that people forget how opportunistic rust spores are. They fly very well in wind currents. So if you say, well, the nearest cedar tree is 3 miles away, trust me, your apple tree, that rust from that cedar tree 3 miles away is going to find that apple tree. So cultural controls aren't going to cut it because since we have the alternate host that's necessary for the disease cycle, the cedar trees, you can't remove all of those. Those are basically these are natural trees in the environment, so it's going to be next to impossible. We have to control it chemically. And also, organic management, unfortunately, is very tricky. So this broad spectrum fungicide is very important for rust control, but it's also important for apple scab. It's also important for Marsanina blotch as well. Um, and you can't use it on stone fruit. You aren't able to use it on peaches, but you are able to use it on pears. And this would be, I think if I'm remembering this, it's late in the day, so I'm trying to remember. You can't use Captan on pears, I know. But the jury's out on Xyram right now. We may completely lose Xyram. So a broad spectrum fungicide for pears for our area, and pears get rust too pretty bad. So basically the disease management, using it as a resistant management tool, as far as the whole hand thinning issue, like all of these changes really pertain to the person who's going to be working with this fungicide. It's not to Joe Q public. This is all due to the applicators and the handlers. And that's something to keep in mind. You know, um, it is okay to tell the EPA, listen, this is how we work safely in order to limit exposure to this. Tell them what you do because it may not be in the suggestions. And that's how, that's important for them to hear from you with regards to what are you doing now in order to limit exposure, unnecessary exposure to your workers to different fungicides. Because right now, basically what they're saying here is, they're assuming if you are hand thinning, you're doing it without gloves. And I know for a fact there are a lot of growers that require their workers to wear gloves anytime that they're handling in the trees to limit their exposure. So it's important for them to get a clear picture of the importance of this fungicide. And for you great folks, I know you are shaking in your boots about this, and I know there's been a lot of talk and sort of a lot of mobilization for the grapes, but the tree fruit folks need it too because you know, they're going to just continue expanding the restrictions, and there may come a time where we are going to be like the great folks, and it's going to be on the chopping block. So, now is the time to make sure your voice is heard. So, but like I said, I will make sure to follow up with a Fruit Times article, hopefully this week, to better outline this again and also provide you talking points as well. And also, when you're providing your comments, put dollar values. Just don't say, please don't give a one line like don't cancel this or don't do this, put a dollar value. Like, this is what's going to happen when I lose this chemical, or I won't have access to this chemical, or this is how much it's going to cost me to implement these mitigation measures because, you know, I have to, adhere to what's going on here. Or because these mitigation measures may be too onerous, I'm going to drop it all together. And what am I going to do for XYZ? So it's important to definitely really describe well to the EPA how this will affect you and the bottom line. So they do read these comments. It's not lip service. They do. They are required to read every single comment. So the more comments there are, the more that they are able to make informed decisions. They need to hear from you. And that's very important. And I will say that I'm slightly optimistic that they are listening because they did give a 30-day extension for this. I wrote an article to the EPA, or I wrote a letter to the EPA, as did others, basically saying you're asking for this in the middle of harvest, and you are not going to get an accurate representation from the growers. And they listened, so they did offer that extension. So this is important, and I've already talked to a few people about this, but please make your voices heard. Let the EPA know basically the importance of this product. So that is my 2 cents in my soapbox.
Cool. Thanks, Gary. And if anyone gets mad about Carrie's article, don't email
No.
myself or Daniel.
Yes. This is and I know we have lots of different growers, and more the merrier. But as far as this is geared towards definitely conventional growers or people who do integrated management. But east of the Mississippi, you need chemicals to control diseases and to have a profitable crop. It's just a fact of life. And organic, I'm all for alternatives and the use of alternatives. But unfortunately, there are no organic alternatives to mancozeb. So that's just the facts. The sulfur is really the only organic broad spectrum. It does not touch rust. Captan does not touch rust. And so this is just a fact of life. And just as a reminder to people who feel the need to email and express their opinions, growers spray when they have to. They aren't spraying willy-nilly. Chemicals are expensive. They only spray when they absolutely need to, and they do it in a responsible way. So that's
Cool.
that's just a gentle reminder. And also, just as another reminder, is that organic is not chemical-free produce. It's a type of management. You do use chemicals with organic management. So just as a
All right.
gentle PSA announcement here.
All right. Sean, you have an update about some SARE funding.
Uh, Thanks, Don. Thanks, Gary, for the update. I'm definitely going to also put down a comment as well because we use mancozeb, like you said, quite a bit. So I have an update about the Northeast SARE funding for farmers. So, folks, if you've ever thought about, you see a new planting system, like for example, you want to try UFO on cherries, or you have a high density planting system that you want to try for peaches, or some unique system that you want to try, or you want to try some alternate products for pest management, disease management that's not yet right. You're not fully sure whether you want to use it, but you want to try it out. Well, look no further, because the Northeast SARE provides farmer funding up to $30,000. That's quite a bit of money for you to try this product out. Be a researcher in your own farm and try this particular aspect out. And we're all here to help you, Carrie, with diseases, Greg with insects, myself with horticulture. Daniel and Don are also available to help. And I can also try to connect you with other people if you're interested to look at, say, alternative sources of energy or something like that to conserve energy bills or things like that. Those are also covered under these Northeast Sustainable Agriculture and Research Education funding. So I hope at least a few of you are interested to be able to use this funding, and we'll definitely help you through the process. But I think this is very useful for somebody, especially if you have that thought in the back of your mind that, what if I tried something like this, but you're not yet ready to put money to that idea. Well, this funding source is especially for growers who have those kind of thoughts and ideas, who want to try it out first before implementing it in their farm. So I hope at least some of you are able to make use of this opportunity. We're all available here to help you with this grant, and if you need assistance with any aspect of it, or if you want to understand it better. I also wanted to quickly mention weed control that Don asked me to talk about, but I kind of forgot earlier. Is I know we've had quite a bit of weed pressure. Myself, I've had weed pressure, and we're all looking to try to do a fall spray, but it's kind of tricky with people who have very late varieties, especially Evercrisp and Pink Lady, where sometimes you're still harvesting, but then if you wait too long, then everything becomes dormant and there's not good uptake of herbicide into the weeds, and that's not good. So if you think that you'll run into that issue, try to pre-plan that and try to have your fall herbicide sprays maybe for the rest of the blocks earlier, and then for specifically for your Pink Lady and Evercrisp blocks or any of those late varieties, so that you're not missing that fall window. But that's it for me. Thanks, Don.
Cool. Well, thank you both. I'll try and get this edited and get this into people's hands so they actually get a podcast episode. Awesome. Well, thank you everybody for listening. Thanks, Kari. Thanks, Shan, for coming on. And say goodbye, everybody.
Yeah, we will not make 3 months in between episodes.
Promise.
So,
Fingers
yeah,
crossed.
yeah. Sort of fell off the rails there, but it was a
Hey,
dry summer. So,
yeah.
but anyway,
All right.
yes, goodbye. Good
Bye,
luck.
everybody.